Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Carter Williams never imagined his life would be turned upside down on an ordinary Tuesday night. He was 38 years old, a veterinarian at a busy clinic in Portland, Oregon, and had always prided himself on being a man of his word and routine. He woke up at 6 every morning, made coffee, dropped the kids off at school, and spent his days caring for animals who couldn't speak, but whose eyes said everything. When he came home in the late afternoon, he expected to find the refuge he'd built over 12 years of marriage to Rachel, his 36-year-old wife, who worked as a marketing manager at an edtech startup. They had 2 children, Mason, 8, a curious boy obsessed with dinosaurs, and Emma, 5, who still believed her dad could heal any wound in the world. Carter thought he had it all, a stable career that gave him purpose, healthy and bright kids, and a comfortable house in a quiet neighborhood. But over the past 2 months, something had clearly changed. Rachel started coming home late, always with elaborate excuses about endless meetings and tight deadlines. She stopped asking about his day, stopped laughing at the jokes he told over dinner, stopped touching him the way she used to. Her phone had become an extension of her body, always face down. When he asked who was texting, she'd snap back that it was just work and accuse him of being paranoid. Carter tried to ignore the signs, blaming it all on work stress, but the feeling that something was wrong kept growing like a shadow. That October Tuesday, Carter got home earlier than usual. He'd canceled a last-minute surgery and decided to surprise his family with pizza and the idea of planning a weekend getaway. Mason and Emma were in the living room watching cartoons when he arrived, and Rachel was upstairs in the bedroom on the phone. Carter walked up the stairs and heard muffled laughter coming from the room, a tone of voice she hadn't used with him in months, sweet and intimate. He paused at the door, listening to fragments of the conversation. When Rachel realized Carter was there, she quickly hung up, her face flushing. He chose not to press her at that moment, went downstairs with her, and suggested the trip while they ate. Rachel looked at him as if he'd just proposed something absurd. "Carter, I don't have time for that right now. Work is insane." He insisted, saying it was important for the family, that the kids missed her. That's when Rachel snapped. "Reconnect? Carter, this marriage is nothing but regret. I wish I could end things with you tonight." The words came out fast and venomous, as if she'd been holding them in for months. Carter felt the floor disappear beneath him. For a second, the silence was deafening. Mason and Emma stopped eating, their wide eyes fixed on their parents. Carter looked at Rachel, and something inside him broke, not sadness, not yet, but a cold clarity, a decision forming in seconds. He took a deep breath and said, with a calm that surprised even himself, "Then it's over. You're free." Rachel blinked, confused. She'd expected tears, pleading, a dramatic scene. But Carter simply stood up, looked at the kids, and said, "Finish your dinner, okay? Dad's going upstairs for a bit." He went up and went into the guest room, closing the door behind him. Rachel's words echoed in his head like a funeral bell. 12 years. 2 kids. An entire life built together. And to her, it was all just regret. But along with the pain came another feeling, the certainty that there was more behind those words. If she wanted out, there was a reason, and Carter was going to find out what it was. Around midnight, when the house was quiet, Carter carefully walked downstairs. Rachel was asleep on the living room couch, her phone beside her, unlocked. Carter picked it up, his heart pounding. He opened the messaging app and saw a name at the top of the list, Jared Foster. Carter didn't know any Jared. He opened the conversation and felt his stomach turn. Months of messages. Hundreds of them. Intimate photos. Laughter at his expense. "Carter's so predictable, he doesn't notice a thing," read one of Rachel's messages. "He thinks everything's fine, poor guy," Jared replied. Carter kept scrolling. There were detailed plans for meetups at Jared's apartment while Carter was at work, expensive dinners at restaurants where Rachel claimed she was with coworkers, promises that they'd soon be free to live their real love. One message in particular cut deep. It was from 2 days earlier. "I just need to wait for my promotion to come through. Then I'll file for divorce, take my share of the assets, and we can finally start our real life together." He'll be devastated, but that's the price he pays for being so ordinary. Carter had to sit down. Ordinary. She thought he was ordinary. After everything they'd built, after he'd worked double shifts to pay for her graduate degree, after caring for the kids alone when she traveled for work, ordinary. He found messages about money too. Rachel had used their joint credit card to pay for fancy dinners, gifts, even a weekend getaway she'd claimed was a corporate retreat. It was all there, documented. Carter took screenshots of everything, hundreds of them, and emailed them to himself before putting the phone back exactly where it had been. Rachel kept sleeping, oblivious to the fact that her life was about to collapse. Carter didn't sleep. He spent the night planning every move. There would be no shouting, no emotional outbursts. He'd act with precision. Rachel thought he was predictable, ordinary. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. The next morning, Carter woke up before everyone, as usual. He made breakfast for Mason and Emma, dropped them off at school, and went straight to a divorce attorney's office. The lawyer, Linda Thorne, was an experienced woman who radiated competence. Carter showed her all the evidence and explained the situation. Linda reviewed everything carefully, then looked up at him. "Mr. Williams, you've got everything you need. She won't have a leg to stand on. We have proof of infidelity and misuse of shared financial resources. In Oregon, that carries serious weight in divorce proceedings, especially regarding custody. You're employed, you have a stable career, and you're actively involved in your children's lives. She used marital funds to finance an affair. This won't end well for her." Carter signed the initial paperwork right then and there. The process was officially underway. But Carter didn't stop there. He researched Rachel's company, TechLearn Solutions, and discovered it had a strict policy against inappropriate workplace relationships. He found Jared Foster on LinkedIn, a software developer in the same department as Rachel. That clearly violated company rules. Carter created an anonymous email and sent it to the company's HR department. He attached carefully selected screenshots of their conversations that not only proved the affair but also showed disparaging comments about coworkers, use of corporate email to schedule personal meetups, and mentions of leaving work early for dates. He didn't do it out of cruelty, he did it because Rachel and Jared had built their relationship at the expense of both the company and his family, and it was only fair they faced the consequences. When Carter got home that afternoon, Rachel was in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone. He placed a thick brown folder right in the center of the dining table. The sound made Rachel finally look up. "What's this?" she asked, annoyed. "Divorce papers. And screenshots of your conversations with Jared Foster." Rachel's face went pale instantly. The phone slipped from her hand. "Carter, I can explain, you don't need to," he interrupted, his voice steady. "I read it all. Every message. Months of lies. Laughing at my expense. Planning to dump me as soon as you got your promotion. You called me ordinary, Rachel. Said I was predictable. And you know what's funny? You were right about me being predictable. I predicted exactly what you were doing, and acted accordingly." Rachel tried to move closer. "Carter, it was a mistake, I wasn't thinking straight, it was a choice," he cut in. "Not a mistake. Months of deliberate choices. You chose to cheat. You chose to lie. You chose to use our money to pay for fancy dinners with him. That's documented too, every receipt, every transaction. It's all going into the case." Rachel started crying. "Please, can't we talk? Can't we try to fix this?" Carter shook his head. "There's nothing to fix. You said this marriage was nothing but regret. I'm just giving you what you asked for. Rachel sobbed. I didn't mean it like that. You meant it exactly like that, because I read the messages where you told him the same thing. That I was a burden. That you could hardly wait to get rid of me. So here you go, Rachel. You're free. Rachel tried a different tack, her voice rising in accusation. You invaded my privacy. You had no right to go through my phone. Carter smiled, but it was humorless. You're right. Technically, I didn't. But you know what right I did have? To know my wife was cheating on me. To know the money I earned was being used to fund your affair. So yes, I invaded your privacy, and I don't regret it. He grabbed his car keys. Oh, one more thing, you might want to check your work email. HR's probably trying to reach you. Rachel picked up her phone with trembling hands and opened her corporate inbox. 3 urgent messages. She looked at Carter, eyes wide. You didn't do that. I did. You violated company policy. I just informed the right people. Rachel exploded. She started yelling, calling him controlling, vengeful, crazy. Carter listened in silence. When she finally ran out of breath, he simply said, "Are you done?" and walked upstairs. He grabbed the suitcase he'd packed and went to the kids' room. Mason and Emma were playing. He knelt in front of them. Dad's going to stay at Uncle Greg's for a few days, okay? But I'll pick you up from school every day, without fail. Emma hugged his neck tightly. Will you come back? Carter kissed her forehead. Dad will always be here for you. Always. No matter where I live. Mason asked, is it because of Mom? Carter didn't lie. Mom and Dad aren't going to live together anymore. But none of this is your fault. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. In the days that followed, Rachel's life unraveled. On Thursday, she was called into a meeting with HR and the legal department. They presented the evidence, messages sent from her work email, unauthorized early departures, inappropriate comments about colleagues, and a prohibited relationship. On Friday, she was fired for cause, not only losing her job but also forfeiting her severance and stock options that were set to vest in 3 months, right when her expected promotion would have kicked in. Under pressure from the company, Jared accepted a transfer to their Austin, Texas office. Before leaving, he blocked Rachel on all social media and vanished from her life. The great love turned out to be a coward. Rachel tried calling Carter dozens of times, but he never answered. She sent desperate messages and even showed up at the vet clinic. Carter blocked her number and instructed the receptionist not to let her in. All communication would go through their lawyers. The divorce moved quickly. Carter had all the proof of infidelity and financial misconduct. Linda Thorne was relentless, building a solid case that painted Rachel as an absent mother, an unfaithful wife, and someone who prioritized her affair over her family. Custody went to a hearing. Mason and Emma spoke with the judge in a closed session. Mason said, "Mom's never home. When she is, she's on her phone. Dad takes care of us. He makes dinner, helps with homework, plays with us. I want to live with Dad." Emma confirmed, "Dad reads me stories every night. Mom always says she's busy." The judge made his decision, primary custody to Carter Williams. Rachel would get limited visitation, 2 weekends a month. The asset division was fair but painful for Rachel. The house would be sold and the proceeds split. Carter proved she'd used significant sums for the affair, and the judge ordered her to repay half of that amount. Rachel lost far more than money, she lost her reputation. Mutual friends who heard the story distanced themselves. The school parent community, where she'd always tried to maintain an image of the perfect mom, now looked at her with suspicion. She became the woman who destroyed her own family for a cheap affair. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Carter sat in the backyard of his new, smaller but cozy house in a quiet Portland neighborhood. It was a Saturday afternoon, spring sun warming everything. Mason and Emma played on the lawn with a golden retriever puppy Carter had adopted from the clinic. Life wasn't perfect. There were challenges, bills to pay alone, moments of loneliness. But it was an honest life, built on truth. He had his kids, who were happier and more stable. He had the job he loved. And he had an inner peace he hadn't felt in years. The anger had passed. Now it was about moving forward, about being the best father he could be. Rachel tried to reconnect a few times. She'd show up unannounced at the school gate, send long letters begging for forgiveness. Once, she cornered him in a parking lot. "Please, Carter, just give me a chance to explain. I was confused, I felt trapped. But I loved you, I still do." Carter looked at her with a mix of pity and exhaustion. "Rachel, you don't love me. You haven't, not for years. You love the idea of me, the security I represented, but not the person I am. And that's okay. I understand now. But I won't pretend nothing happened. I won't go back to a lie just because you realized too late what you lost. Please," she insisted, tears streaming. "We can start over. I've changed. I'm in therapy. I got a new job. I'm glad you're improving your life," Carter said sincerely. "But it won't be with me. You made your choices, Rachel. I made mine. Now we live with them." Rachel landed a much lower-level job at a small company, a huge step down from her former position. She lived alone in a cramped apartment in a less desirable part of town. Jared never reached out again. She tried contacting him a few times, but he blocked her everywhere. Rachel realized too late that she'd traded a real family, a devoted husband, and children who loved her for an empty fantasy. The weekends she had the kids were the only times she felt whole, but even those felt different now. Mason and Emma were polite but distant. An invisible wall stood between them. And that hurt more than anything. One Sunday afternoon, as Carter was making dinner, Mason walked in and sat on the counter. "Dad, is Mom coming back?" Carter turned off the stove and knelt in front of his son. "No, Mason. Your mom and I aren't going to live together again. But that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. She does, in her own way. Sometimes people make really big mistakes, mistakes that hurt the people they love. And when that happens, we have to move on and build something new. You can't fix everything. Are you sad?" Emma asked, appearing in the doorway. Carter smiled, a tear slipping out. "No, sweetheart. I'm at peace. I'm happy I have you too. Sometimes things have to end so better things can begin." Emma hugged his leg. "I love you, Dad. I love you too. I love you both more than anything in the world." And it was true. The pain had passed, turning into acceptance and then gratitude, gratitude for discovering the truth before wasting more time, gratitude for having the courage to act, for refusing to settle for scraps of affection. Carter's revenge wasn't explosive, cruel, or sadistic. It was surgical, calculated, and just. He didn't destroy Rachel out of pleasure or hatred, he simply protected himself and his children from someone who saw them as obstacles on her selfish path to happiness. Reporting the affair to HR wasn't about ruining her career, it was because they'd clearly violated company policy. Filing for immediate divorce wasn't impulsiveness, it was self-preservation. Fighting for custody wasn't vengeance, it was fatherly love. The lesson he learned was simple but profound: anyone who throws away what they have for a whim, for the illusion of something better, doesn't deserve a second chance, not because people can't change, but because the one who was discarded deserves enough self-respect not to settle for being someone's second option. And anyone who underestimates the intelligence of a calm, patient, observant person pays the highest price of all. Rachel thought Carter was predictable, ordinary, easy to fool. She was wrong. He was just calm. But calm isn't weakness. Calm is the silence before the storm, the preparation before action. And when Carter finally acted, it was with a precision Rachel never imagined possible. Carter rebuilt his life on the ruins of a broken marriage, and this time, every brick was laid with the certainty that he deserved something real, something true, not perfect, because perfection doesn't exist, but honest. He didn't know if he'd ever fall in love again, if he'd open his heart to someone new. For now, it didn't matter. He had his kids, he had peace, he had his dignity intact. Rachel kept trying to come back, showing up at random moments, sending birthday messages asking to talk. But the door was already closed. Not locked in anger, just closed, like you close a chapter in a book that's no longer worth rereading. And Carter, at last, was free. Free from lies, free from pain, free to be a father, to be himself, to live without looking over his shoulder waiting for the next betrayal. That freedom, earned through tears and courage, was worth more than any marriage built on sand. And as he watched his children play in the backyard, the Portland horizon painted in shades of orange and pink at sunset, Carter knew he'd made the right choice. Not the easiest one, but the right one. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.